Yeah, or everybody mumbled. Amen, right? Hey, well, this is the final week of our series, Fear Not. And we've talked about a couple different things, but there's two main ideas about fear that we've talked about. And the first is that fear is based on our perception of reality, not reality. I'll say that again. Fear is based upon our perception of reality, what we believe about what is true, not actually what is true. Similar to this idea of like Captain Hook believing that every tick-tock sound could be that clock, and so he's triggered right away. We fill in gaps in the stories. We don't live based upon reality every time because we don't always know. I can be worried about a conversation I have to have later. I can be worried about an event in my future, whether that event is my kids graduating high school or other life circumstances. I can be worried now, but all I'm really worried about is things that I'm inserting into a story that hasn't happened yet. I don't have some sort of prophet power or anything like that to know exactly what's going to happen. What I'm worried about is things that I'm inserting into the story. And what we insert into the story becomes what we believe. And that's what triggers us to be afraid. The second thing, and I already kind of said this about fear, is that there's a pattern to fear every single time. Every time that we are afraid, we are anxious, that we're isolating ourselves based upon a fear or a comfort zone or whatever it is, there's always a pattern. And that pattern starts with what we believe. It starts with what I believe. It goes to something that triggers us, something that reminds us of a memory. It reminds us of something. It's a word. It's a person. There are people in our lives that when they are mentioned, it triggers us becoming someone else. Similar to like some of us when we're a totally different person here, but when we go visit our family for Thanksgiving, we become the person that we are around those people. We become a different person. Could be better, could be worse, could be just a different flavor of you. But there's always a pattern to fear. And that oftentimes when we talk about fear, we think about, I'm afraid. I need to stop being afraid. But in reality, we have to go back to the very beginning of the pattern. The very beginning of the pattern is what we believe. What have I placed in my thoughts? What have I allowed myself to believe that has led me to this place? For me, I get afraid quite a bit, and I'm okay to tell you that. And one of the main fears that comes up then when I think about like fears that are common in my life are the fear of losing a loved one. And I don't mean like I just sit in my bed and I'm like, someday this person, I'm going to lose them. But I mean like, you know that moment, like for those of you that are like parents, that moment when you're like, I don't know where my kid's at. Then you start thinking, I don't see them. I'm not going to make noise yet. I don't want anyone to know the type of parent I am right now. But then you start thinking, when was the last time I did see my son? Then you have these thoughts of like, I'm going to text my wife. I'm just going to see if she knows. And there's all these like little things, but then there's that moment after all these little things that you do as a parent when you go, all the stories of what could happen are like flooding your mind. You've watched the news, you've watched movies about kidnapping, and you've seen that shady van that sometimes is parked by over there or whatever, and you start having these thoughts that go into your head. Not at first, but the longer it goes, all of a sudden there's that threshold where it just clicks, and it becomes, I'm filling in a new story. That's the moment that we're going to talk about today. That terror that just overtakes you. You become a different person. All of a sudden, all my training, all my skills, all my experience, it's kind of out the window. I'm just responding to this moment. That's when, there's moments when, like, I'm not going to say who, but my kids will leave the gate open, right? And the dog's out. And there was a time that it was at night that the dog was out, that they discovered, hey, where's Tate? And, like, that's the moment where you're kind of like, okay, when was the last time I saw the dog? Let's check the places that he goes. And nope. And then that moment where a kid goes, the gate's open. And I get emotional because I am just imagining that dog. And so the last time this happened at night, it was several months ago, but we're thinking the worst. I'm thinking, if I don't get out there, this dog has no wilderness skills whatsoever. This is a spaniel that is just far, far from descending from wolves. Like there's miles between like their descendants from the wolves, right? So I am running, shoes untied, probably like unmatched shoes, just running without a phone through the neighborhood, looking for my dog, right? In the middle of, this was early spring. So there's like some snow out and stuff. And my kids are like on their bikes. Usually we'd be like, where are you going on your bike? Now we're just like, just go find the dog. Right in the street to find our dog. Same thing can happen with kids though. And most of the time our kids are at a neighbor's house. They went with my wife somewhere and I didn't know they were going. But something happens when terror takes over. I think you know what I'm talking about that, right? Like we can't negate the power that fear has over us when all of a sudden after like we find my dog, we find the kid, and your heart is just beating. And there's this overwhelming feeling of like, what have I been doing the last 10 minutes? Like I have been a different person. Now, fear has its positive things because we need to be able to have like a fear, like as a kid, you need to have a fear of like, if I go in the road, cars can't always stop. If I leave my parents and just wander, or, as a dog, like they need to have some fear. If I leave the gate, like there are dangers out there. But fear is also something that can become like a prison. And we shared this early on in the series. Rick Warren talks about it like it's a prison. He says, fear is a self-imposed prison that will keep you from becoming what God intends you to be. You must move against it with the weapons of faith and love. So you probably know and care about someone who can relate to this, or it could be you. That fear can be a prison, that there are triggers. Sometimes they're familial triggers. They're a place we go. There's the thought of applying for another job because last time that I applied for a job like this is what happened. Last time I put myself out there in a friendship, this is what happened. Or I saw a story in the news, or a friend told me this. There are all kinds of triggers that can hold us captive. Today we're going to talk about conquering fear, though. Not the idea of ignoring fear, numbing fear. We're going to talk about conquering it. And there are 3 levels to fear that actually I believe that Matthew wants us to know about when he writes this. We're going to read that text again that Kurt read really well a minute ago. But I want you to look because there are 4 different times that the writer Matthew mentions fear or being afraid. 4 different times. And each one of them is a different context and a different level of fear. Because what I want you to understand today is that God being with you doesn't mean that the storm will be gone, but he will be over it. And that changes what we believe about the situation and changes the way fear has power over us. So let me read this to us and look for those moments, okay? Now, after the Sabbath, toward the dawn of the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene, one of the disciples, and the other Mary went to see the tomb. And behold, there was a great earthquake, for an angel of the Lord descended from heaven and came and rolled back the stone and sat on it. I just kind of imagine like the angel just kind of reclining, just like I'm going to sit here on this rock. I just moved. Verse 3, his appearance was like lightning, and his clothes white as snow. And for, say it, fear of him, the guards trembled and became like dead men. But the angel said to the women, what did he say? Do not be afraid, for I know that you seek Jesus who was crucified. He is not here, for he is risen, as he said. Come see the place where he lay. So I mentioned they went in there. Then go quickly and tell his disciples that he has risen from the dead. And behold, he is going before you to Galilee. There you will see him. See, I have told you. Verse 8. So they departed, the 2 women. So they left quickly from the tomb with what? With fear and great joy, and ran to tell his disciples. And behold, Jesus met with them and said, greetings. And they came up and took hold of his feet and worshiped him. Then Jesus said to them, do not be afraid. Go and tell my brothers and go to Galilee, and they will see me there. So 4 different times Matthew feels the need to mention fear or being afraid. First of all, he mentions the guards. Now, the guards, these are people that were trained. They had experience in some sort of battle. When your only job is to guard a cave in the middle of the night, you should be ready for things to happen. When you're guard, like there's a term we use, being on guard. If I'm on guard, what am I? I'm ready. I'm not just relaxed. I'm not just reclining somewhere, but I'm ready for something to happen. But what does it say about these guards in verse 4? And for fear of him, the angel, right? The guards trembled. We can all kind of imagine what it looks like when we tremble. That's that moment where you kind of realize, like, okay, I don't know where my kids are. I need to start shouting in the store, down the aisles. I need to tell people, have you seen a kid with one shoe on and a red shirt? I need to find my kids. The guards trembled and became like dead men. They are paralyzed with fear. This is when fear just takes over. All their training, everything is gone. And you could say, well, anybody would be afraid of this. Like an angel just rolled a stone away. Well, here's the reality. There are women there that were not fainting. You see, what the guards did is they inserted into the story something crazy is going on, right? For some of us, it might be like there's aliens attacking, or it's the end of the world, or we're all going to die. This is terror. Terror is fear without hope, or even fear without faith. This is pure terror. There is no good that can come of this. We are destined for this to be the end. Terror equals fear without hope or without faith. This means all is lost, game over. And maybe that's you today. There could be a relationship. There could be a situation where you know the way it affects you. I'm triggered by this kind of conversation. I'm triggered by this topic. I don't ever want to go to do this again. I don't want to see this person again. It's because you're terrorized. You become a different person. And what I believe today is that there is hope, that we can move past terror, because the women there responded very different. Verse 5, but the angel said to the women, do not be afraid, for I know that you seek Jesus who was crucified. He is not here, for he is risen, as he said. Come see the place where he lay. Then go quickly and tell his disciples that he has risen from the dead. And behold, he is going before you to Galilee. There you will see him. See, I have told you. So they departed quickly from the tomb with fear and great joy. I think that's really important to recognize, that Matthew was like, we need to mention here that they have fear. The angel said, do not be afraid. They departed from the tomb with fear and great joy and ran to tell his disciples. I think we have this idea that if we know what's true, all of a sudden it'll just be easy. Like if I know before public speaking, you know what, these people are nice. They've been nice before. I'm sure they're not going to throw stuff at me. I'm sure that they'll be nice when I'm up here. It still doesn't mean that there's not some fear. But when I come up here to speak, and what the women were going through here was what's called wonder. And this is actually a term my friend Phil Wiseman, another pastor friend of mine, came up with. That he gave this a great term. He said, this is wonder. This is fear with hope. That having fear, but with hope. I think we even have it on the screen there. Fear with hope. Meaning you see what's happening. You see the guards trembling and falling over themselves, bumbling around. I mean, they had swords, they had training, but they are paralyzed with fear. But there's something else in your story, and that's questions. See, wonder is fear with hope. Could it be that God is up to something here? Could it be that there's more going on here than just an earthquake or a stone being rolled away or this angel that looks like lightning dressed in white on top of the stone? See, the women saw the angel. They were not terrorized. Just like what the angel said, is as Jesus has said to you, there was something about what they knew that could be occurring here. And that's what happens a lot of times if we're in this stage of fear, is that we know that there's risk. We know that I need to do something about it. We're not paralyzed by it because we have this belief, we have this other picture in our minds of something beautiful happening. Just similar to like some people on their wedding day or some people on like a big day are filled with fear. But there's this picture of a beautiful life on the other side of this rather uncomfortable moment where they have to stand in front of everybody and kiss their girlfriend in front of their mom, like they have to do all this really uncomfortable stuff for them. They're afraid, but they have this picture of a beautiful future that they want. And so they're willing to question, maybe this is worth it. Maybe actually this isn't as bad as I think. Maybe there's something else God is doing here. The women were not full of terror. They were full of wonder, still fearful. But there was something that needed to happen before they went to the third phase of fear. See, the women saw the angel, they obeyed, and then this all seems really simple, but it wasn't simple for them to do what the angel said. The angel wanted them to go and tell the other disciples, and for the other disciples to have the other disciples come and meet Jesus in Galilee, right? Now that seems like a really simple thing. Today we would just send a text, right? We would just get on social media. We would just let people know. It would be very, very easy to do. But in that day, the idea that there were men in a room somewhere mourning the loss of their leader, for women to barge in that day, in that very patriarchal society, that was very rude, it was very risky, and in some ways, completely disrespected. They did not have a legal right to be able to do that. Like the angel was asking them to do something that they were not legally supposed to be able to do. Now, the gospel always moves forward, and even though that was a time when that was not something that was respected, I mean, the angels didn't really care. God didn't really care. God said, you know what? We're going to push this patriarchy aside, and we're going to move forward and have you deliver the news about Jesus resurrecting and be the first people to do that. So, and you can imagine them as they're walking back to the city to tell them, maybe running back. He said to go quickly. There's always time for the lies to creep in. Have you ever been like really excited about something? You're like, yes, we're going to do this. We're going to invest in this. We're going to go there. We're going to stop doing this. I'm going to make this change in my life. But the moment that you like start thinking about it, if you don't do it right away and you have some time, what happens? We have time to start thinking about it. We have time for all those doubts to try and like their last shot at us. The women were told to take this bold step of obedience, to go into the city and spread the word that something that had never happened and hasn't happened since occurred to a bunch of people, and also that they were women. That was also putting them at a place where this was difficult. But they did it. They did something that was very difficult. This is how you get to the third stage. And some of us are still in that wonder stage. We're in that terror stage. This is how you get to the courage stage. And that is this. Wonder turns to courage only after a bold step of obedience. Wonder turns to courage. If we want to live courageous lives, it's not just believing the right things, but it's taking a step towards what those beliefs lead us to. Once they chose to step out, then they get to see Jesus. In verses 9 and 10, and you guys read 10 with me, but I'll just do it by myself this time. Verse 9, and behold, Jesus met them and said, greetings. And they came up and took hold of his feet and worshiped him. Then Jesus said, isn't this odd that Matthew thought this is important for us to know? Jesus said to them, do not be afraid. Go and tell my brothers to go to Galilee, and there they will see me. The final blow to fear is taking a bold step of faith. And I don't want this to sound like some sort of sorcery where it's like, if I just do this and I just say this and I just sing this, then Jesus shows up and everything's good. But there is an element of obedience and action that's needed in walking with Jesus. In fact, when Jesus says, follow me, he's not saying believe in me. He's saying literally, do what I do. That the third step of overcoming fear, the third phase of fear, is courage. And courage is fear with hope and action. So we have terror, that is fear without hope. We have wonder, which is fear with hope. And we have courage, which is fear with hope and action. But it's not just like the fear and all those things are gone. It's Jesus over my fear. It's Jesus hasn't calmed the storm yet, but he's in the storm with me. It's Jesus hasn't healed this relationship yet, but he's with me as I navigate. What do I say? What do I not say? How much time do I invest in this awkward or this hurtful relationship? Struggles are still present, but Jesus is over them. That all of a sudden, that same trigger, because my belief is knowing Jesus is with me, I can have courage that those triggers, I respond completely different to them. I don't run from community, I run to community. I ask for prayer, I go to people. I believe in the hope of a restored relationship. I believe in the hope of a restored life, a restored marriage, a restored relationship. See, I think one of the most difficult things today that I see fear doing is it's just robbing us of our hope. It's robbing us of our hope. I think there's people that are trying to take action, but action without hope is just kind of like swinging a bat around in the dark, hoping we're going to hit something. That if we don't have a dream that we believe in, a picture that we believe in, one that God has given us of our families, of our lives being different, then all we're doing is just spinning the wheels. If I told you, hey, we're going to go on a road trip, and you said, that's not weird, I'll go on a road trip with you. And we got in the car, and I said, I'll take care of everything. You just bring your clothes, you just bring your stuff that you need. We're going to go on a road trip. And you said, where are we going? I said, we're going to New York City. I got tickets to some plays, if that's what you're into. If you're not into that, I said something else in this story. It's all made up anyways, right? We get in the car, and we go, and we get on the interstate, and I get on 70 West. Maybe you would say, oh, you got on the wrong direction. New York is the other way. What if I said, no, we're good. We'll get there eventually. You'd be like, no, we won't. There's an ocean, and there's mountains, and I only took a couple days off for this, or I only took a week off for this. You would have all kinds of ways to basically say to me, Jared, it doesn't matter how much you want to get to New York. It doesn't matter that you bought tickets to the plays or the game or whatever. It doesn't matter that you have a full tank of gas and you believe that we're going to get there if you don't actually go the right direction. And I think that a lot of us today, we don't really have much direction when fear is just clouding that. But what Jesus says is that if you can just follow me, if you can just give me your trust enough, you can face your fears with me. That you can get to the place that I prepared for you. That you don't have to just drive aimlessly or worry that things will never work out. So during our reflection time today, I just want you to reflect. I hope this was a shorter one today. I want you to reflect on these. Because likely what's happened in this, as we've talked about beliefs and triggers, is that I've triggered you. That there's been moments that have been uncomfortable. There's been moments where you're like, I just don't want to deal with this. I just don't want to think about this. And what I would ask you to do now is we're going to play some music and we're going to just ask it. You would just respond. And I'm going to go over the 3 levels of fear. And we talked about like getting out of the boat a couple weeks ago. We talked about the idea of Adam and Eve and how there's always this pattern. And it starts with our beliefs. And some of us, a belief that we have is that my fears will never get better. That this situation is unhealable, unreconcilable, and I just want to tell you that I think that's a lie. That there's a picture that I believe God wants to give you of something restored. That the beauty of being part of Restoration Church is that we want to be a part of God's restoration of all things. Not my restoration, the work that I do or the work that you do. The work that our more money can do or more time can do, but the work that God can do. That when Jesus died on the cross, he was saying, I love you so much I love you enough to die. I'd rather die than for you and your life to be lost. Some of us are in the stage of wonder, where we have this hope, but we're kind of just at a place where we're not ready to take that action step. We're not ready to have that conversation. We're not ready to give this up yet. We're not ready to make this commitment. I can just tell you that if God is calling you out of that boat, He's going to be with you. I used to think that God would me, that it was just like, well, I'm going to call you out, but good luck once you're out there. What I realized is that's just a lie. But that if God has given you a dream, a picture of a better, I encourage you to take that action step. I'd encourage you to get some support if you're like, I've tried before and I've fallen on my face. That maybe a conversation with a pastor or maybe a conversation with a friend and just saying, hey, can we do this together? Because I know that God wants me to go there and I'm too comfortable here. And the third is courage. And I want to celebrate with you if you are at a place where you can just celebrate the courage in your life. But at the same time, just because we are in that third phase of courage doesn't mean that the problem has gone away. And you're like, sometimes being courageous can be really tiring. Sometimes we're courageous at school, we're courageous at work, courageous at home, and it just gets really tiring. And what can happen is we can feel like, God, where's that picture that you gave me? I've been doing what you've asked. Where are you? And so faithfulness are what I pray for you. So we have those. We have terror, wonder, courage. And so just for a moment, we're going to give you a chance just to reflect. And a prayer that I would recommend you pray, just in the stillness of your mind, is, God, move me where you want to move me.